Hello, and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, bred for degeneracy.
I had that down as an outro line.
Right? Like, that's a pretty good line.
Pretty good
it's right
line.
at the top of the movie, too. Like, usually I don't like to take a line that's, like, right at the start of the movie, because it's like, I'm sure something better will come over the course of the 2 hours. But this case, I was like, I gotta go with that one.
It peaked very early.
It did.
Like us.
Oh, well, that's true. After our GoldenEye episode, it was all downhill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at what point of this film are we in our careers of spy movie podcasting? Are we at, like, the halfway point, or are we towards the end now?
Someone is going to put us out of our misery unceremoniously, like the end of this movie.
Here's hoping. Well, let's not get into this week's film too much, because we need to induct our newest, latest, bestest, greatest Spy Hard's Die Hard of all time. And Cam, let the glorious people out there know how to become a Spy Hard's Die Hard.
Yes, you can do so by leaving a 5-star review with Apple Podcasts, and then we will read that review on the air and give you your top secret Spy Hard's nickname or code name.
Now, I thought I would try a different Apple Podcast feed, so I went searching around the globe to find a different source for our reviews, and I stumbled across this one from the Apple Podcasts in Pakistan.
Ooh, wow, nice.
Yeah. So here we go. From Archie747, 5 stars. Fascinating behind-the-scenes Bond stories. I have truly enjoyed listening to some fascinating Bond stories and events that happen behind the scenes. They bring a human perspective. Good job, guys.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Perhaps unfortunate that we don't have a Bond movie to give you a code name from this week, but we kind of do a little bit, because I am going to, give this dear listener the code name of the movie, Scorpio.
Sure.
And I mean, what else, right?
Yeah.
Scorpio was a fake Bond movie that I once wrote a song for, an opening song for. So there's a little bit of a Bond connection. Hopefully that's good enough.
And those of you out there that have been listening since mostly the very beginning would know the genesis of the Scorpio story. I'd recommend checking out our Tomorrow Never Dies review to hear more about that with Cam's sister Janine and their childish exploits of making Bond songs. And we've been promised that we will hear this Bond song one day. So, is it happening, Cam? Is it coming?
Well, it's so tough because I wrote it, in grade like 8, 9, something like that. But
when you personally peaked.
Well, obviously. But also, I don't have it anymore, like a hard copy. I don't know the words to it, but my sister does, because she's the one that sang it back in the day, and she has this absolutely uncanny ability to memorize song lyrics after hearing a song once.
Wow, okay.
And so, like, she has memorized those lyrics. She can just do it off the top of her head whenever. But for me, like, if you asked me to sit and write the lyrics, I couldn't do it.
So it all hinges on another member of the Smith clan.
It does indeed, yeah.
Untrustworthy bunch, I hear.
Oh, incredibly. We are not, we're not Bond, we're more the villains. We are the people in the undersea lair.
I have nothing to add to that.
And that is completely fair. Very few people have that much to add when it comes to us.
But back on track, Archie717, enjoy your new codename Scorpio. Use it wherever you like, at the bank, at the library, with your family. We don't mind. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you for leaving the 5-star review. Join Scorpio and the rest of the gang as a Spy Hard Die Hard. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. But without further ado, let's get to the review. All right, let's get to it, folks. Cam, you've kind of given the title away, but let's officially announce it. What are we talking about this week?
Yes, we are tackling 1973's Scorpio, directed by Michael Winner and starring Burt Lancaster and Alain Delon.
I like how you pronounce his name.
I tried. I hope it was okay, and I apologize to any French speakers who just pulled their earbuds out of their ears and threw them on the ground in fury.
I've never heard him actually say his name. Alain, I would have said is Alain,
Sure.
but I mean, I think we should just go with like a really British pronunciation, call him Alan for the rest of the episode, or we can pretend that we're like Velociraptors in Jurassic Park 3.
Alan?
Alan.
Yeah. We just call him Alan Delon.
It's like the perfect like Midwestern name. He owns a pickup truck and has shotguns in his house.
Yeah, he's not an actor that I'm like massively familiar with. I've seen Le Samurai, obviously.
Sure.
And other than that, he's in the fourth Airport movie, or the Concorde, Airport 79. I think those are the only things I've seen him in, but I know he was like a big star at the time. Maybe there's a couple others, but yeah, they're totally skipping my mind.
And of course, an airplane connection. He played a Velociraptor in Jurassic Park 3.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
Not one of the great sequels.
No, but you can't say he's not a character actor that doesn't really throw himself into the role, because you had no idea it was him playing that Velociraptor, did you, folks?
I mean, he was Dynamite in that movie.
Wow, we've really really hammered that joke to the ground, haven't we?
You asked earlier if we'd peaked, and well, yeah.
Welcome to the lackluster section, folks. Here we go. And speaking of, here is your synopsis for 1973's Scorpio. Cross is an old hand at the CIA who often teams up with Frenchman Jean Scorpio Laurier, a gifted freelance operative. After their last mission together, the CIA orders Scorpio to eliminate Cross, leaving him no choice but to obey.
Yeah. Well, what I'd really like, though, Scott, if you could just, for the benefit of the listeners, just walk them through all the twists and turns of this movie.
So it all started back in 1987 when I was born. No, I don't think I could do it in 90 minutes.
It's a bit of a head scratcher at times.
There are not many films that we've watched where I've had to stop and collect my thoughts and then check Wikipedia to make sure I think what is going on is going on.
Yeah, I had to read a Wikipedia synopsis before we actually hit record on this one.
And I watched this twice.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to say, which we'll get to. But I mean, from the sounds of it, this was the first time for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Winner, I know him best for his Death Wish films. And we did talk about The Mechanic, the first movie that he did with Charles Bronson.
Which has a connection to this.
It does, yeah. But he's not a director whose work I'm that familiar with. He made a lot of kind of junky action movies.
Yeah.
And some westerns and things like that. But he's just not someone whose work I've looked at that closely.
No, that's fair. And, Burt Lancaster is another bit of a gap in my filmography. I don't think I've seen much of his work in terms of films I've seen.
I've watched a lot of Burt Lancaster films. That I've got going for me.
You really do. Look at you go.
I really have. Yeah, From Here to Eternity is probably his best known movie, I think. And you may not know the title. It's one of those classic movies that no one really knows the name if they haven't seen it, but they know an image, which is the man and the woman making out on the beach in black and white with the surf coming in over top of them. And you'd probably know that shot if you saw it.
Sure.
But other than that, like, he won an Oscar for Elmer Gantry, but that's not a movie that people really remember now. He was one of the biggest stars of his time, but I don't know that he's made a ton of movies that kind of linger the way that, say, Clark Gable has like a Gone with the Wind or something, or Humphrey Bogart has Casablanca. He doesn't really have many of those.
Okay. Well, let's, because we have to remember here, this is a 1970s, suspenseful political thriller we're dealing with here. We can't have fun in this episode.
No.
Everything needs to be deadly serious and highly cynical.
That's right. No more Jurassic Park 3 jokes.
We're sorry, everyone. We will be very straight with the rest of this episode.
Indeed. Button it down.
Straight down. Cam, let's talk about it. No pun here. How did Scorpio get made?
So it began life as a screenplay called Dangerfield. It gets no respect. No respect, Scott.
I was going to do a really bad impression there, but I think it's best if I don't. Because this film has got things about people pretending to be other people that are questionable as it is.
Yeah, so it was written by David W. Rintels, who was a Boston-born writer-producer who started out working on a lot of big TV shows like The Defenders, The Invaders, FBI. He really had a lot of TV, and this was his first theatrical feature, his first screenplay that was turned into a movie. He only has one other movie to his entire filmography, and he's like a very successful TV guy, but he co-wrote the 1991 Sally Field film, Not Without My Daughter, which was about Sally Field escaping with her daughter from Iran from an abusive marriage. But like, I remember commercials for that movie as a kid, but it's not the best remembered movie. Other than that, he's a TV guy. He won 3 Emmys for TV movies and was nominated for 6 more.
I don't want to take away from the accomplishments of David Rintel, because he's got many.
Yeah.
I actually want to ask you a question about something you do that I've noticed.
Okay.
When you introduce people,
yeah,
you always say, so the writer of this film is David Rintel, Boston born, and you've always had it where they're from.
Yeah.
And it always tickles me slightly, because I just wonder if there's like, is it to a certain, like, a few listeners out there you're hoping they're like on the treadmill or they're like out walking their dogs and they're like, Boston, yeah! But just, you trying to pop them or something? Who is that for?
I think sometimes it's interesting for context, especially like when we talked about Deadly Affair, which is a very British film, and it's like New York born director. And you're like, oh, that's weird. That doesn't really line up. So I always think it's interesting just kind of where all these people come from.
He put me in my place, folks. I can't argue with that. That's a valid answer. I feel stupid.
Yeah. Here's a movie, set in Washington, D.C. and, various other locations. And, a lot of it obviously in Vienna. But, Boston-born writer came up with the whole thing.
I guess I have to shut up now. Oh, wait, it's a conspiracy thriller. I can't be funny. Sorry, everyone.
That's right. So this screenplay called Dangerfield was picked up by Michael Winner, a director who was a British director, born in London. And that's right. That's right. Scott laughs. But this is a very American film in many ways. What do you know? You've got a British director. So have at it. So Michael Winner, we've talked about before when we did The Mechanic, but started his career in the 50s. And wrote a lot of B movies and was really best known once you get into the later 60s for working with major actors like Burt Lancaster, Oliver Reed, Marlon Brando in kind of their lesser years, like periods where they weren't necessarily as hot as they once were. And so he's working with them a lot on westerns and action movies. He teams up with Charles Bronson along the way with obviously The Mechanic and then the Death Wish films and various other action films. And this movie, Scorpio, was actually his follow-up to The Mechanic.
Oh, wow.
And you could definitely see some similarities.
In sort of like the premise.
Yeah. The whole, like, younger student taking out the mentor figure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's jumped out to me the first viewing. I mean, I'm not going to maybe compare them. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end. Maybe a little bit of comparison between the two. But otherwise, apart from that sort of thematic connective tissue, I don't think there's much there.
No. And, Michael Winner worked for a long time, and his final movie was actually in 1998. So this guy worked from the 50s to 1998, and his final movie, which I've never heard of or seen, is called Parting Shots, but it co-starred Bob Hoskins, John Cleese, Oliver Reed, Joanna Lumley, Ben Kingsley, and Diana Rigg.
It's a pretty good cast. It feels very British.
It is very British, yeah. London-born director. And so Michael Winner really loved this Dangerfield script and decided he wanted to make it and was very much inspired by The Spy Who Came In From the Cold from 1965. Obviously a very classic film that we have not tackled on the show yet, but we will one day, folks.
It's our last episode, everyone.
Yeah. And so he wanted that kind of gritty realism that kind of works well in 1973, where it's cynical filmmaking, right?
It's the years of 3 Days of the Condor, Parallax View. That's all going on the roundabout now.
Yeah, and not so much cynical filmmaking, but filmmaking about cynical things, cynical topics.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, politically speaking, at least the US had just come out of like the hippie movement that ended. You've got the Vietnam War just wrapped up. You've got Watergate happening, Reagan stepping down. Like it's a bit of a
Nixon stepping down.
oh, sorry, that's Reagan's later, Nixon stepping down.
Yeah.
He is not a crook. Yeah, that was my impression of the episode, everyone. There you
go. So at this point, Burt Lancaster joins the party. And
what a party it is.
What a party it is. Burt Lancaster's really interesting dude. Like he was a circus acrobat who enlisted in World War II and discovered acting in the USO tour.
Sure.
And was really like, oh, I might be good at that. And he became a star off his very first movie in 1946. This man, basically after the war, was like, movie? Sounds good. Boom, I'm a massive star. And I'll be a massive star till the day I die.
So he's doing the inverse of the Spy Hards podcast. We're doing that slow burn, character actor. Does a lot of small parts for years and years and years, and then hopefully, something happens, and people turn up.
We're like J.K. Simmons, just waiting for our whiplash.
Right. So are we in our, like, J. Jonah Jameson stage?
Judging from the facial hair, yes.
Get me pictures of Spider-Man. Sure.
Yeah. And so Burt Lancaster, his first film was called The Killers, and it was a noir thriller, 4 Oscar nominations for that movie, and it goes on just like a long run. This guy is so successful. But at this point, his star has faded a bit, and so that's why he's making, a Michael Winner kind of conspiracy action film.
Sure.
And he still plugs on, though. Like 10 years later, he does a movie called The Osterman Weekend, which is another spy film we'll tackle in the future.
Yep.
His final theatrical film, not a bad way to go out, 1989's Field of Dreams.
Oh, okay. Cool.
He pointed at that cornfield and said, this is it. And he wandered into that cornfield and was never seen again.
Where would you go after that?
Right? Yeah. So Burt Lancaster was kind of famous, though, for like turning down a lot of big movies. He turned down Ben-Hur, Dirty Harry, later Death Wish, and also The Mechanic. So around this point in time, his career was kind of, as I said, like a little faded. So he was looking for career opportunities in Europe, and that led to Scorpio and working with Michael Winner.
I mean, I don't know much about the chap, but I do love the bit of trivia about him in the IMDb trivia. Have you seen this?
Which one are you talking about?
That he travels with a gymnasium.
Yeah, I mean, he was an acrobat in the circus and apparently did almost all his own stunts in this movie, which for 60 years old, hey, he was Tom Cruise before Tom Cruise was Tom Cruise.
This isn't me knocking him. This is me being impressed because, it's something Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson does now. So what we're saying is Burt Lancaster is the OG Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I think that's what he's known for. Although Dwayne Johnson is known as The Rock. What is Burt Lancaster known as?
I don't have a funny answer to go in there, but if you do, let us know. I'm taking the pressure off of myself, the comedic pressure to be funny in this situation, and throwing it to the audience.
Maybe just The Burt.
Oh. Is that where we're landing on that?
Keep it definitive,
See, I think drop the. Like Facebook.
Okay. Right. Okay.
He's just Burt.
Like Norm on Cheers.
Burt!
Yeah. So, the title Dangerfield was already registered, so they couldn't actually use that as a title. Although I'm not sure of a movie called Dangerfield, but apparently there's something out there. Maybe something that was in development at the time. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they selected Scorpio as the title because it was the zodiac sign that Michael Winner shared with Burt Lancaster, Alain Delon, and producer Walter Mirich. So that was kind of the inspiration for the title Scorpio.
I can tell you that Dangerfield was never a movie, but there was a TV show called Dangerfield in the 1990s.
Okay, maybe there was some sort of like a script that was sitting in a vault somewhere that had been registered by whatever studio made it.
I was trying to give you some sort of like cool connection, maybe like someone acted in both, but literally there is no like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon between Scorpio and Dangerfield, the TV series from the BBC in the 1990s.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Mm.
But okay, well, basically the party assembled now for Scorpio liked the project, but they still wanted a rewrite. They felt it wasn't quite there, so they brought on Gerald Wilson, who started off in the early 60s and co-wrote the 1967 British crime thriller Robbery for director Peter Yates. I've never heard of Robbery, but Peter Yates would go on to do movies like Bullet, so he was kind of a big deal. More notably, though, he had written a 1971 Burt Lancaster Western called Lawman, directed by Michael Winner. So he was a go-to guy for Michael Winner at this point, and this is just 2 years after Lawman.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wrote the Charles Bronson film Chato's Land, which obviously Michael Winner directed, and then obviously Scorpio. And he also worked in the future with Michael Winner on The Stone Killer, did some uncredited work on Death Wish, and a movie called Firepower. And his final credit, which I normally wouldn't really mention, it was a Swedish-Danish co-production, but it was called Decoding, and it was starring Isabella Scorupco, Natalia from Goldeneye.
Ah, see, that's the sort of connection I was looking for in Dangerfield, but I couldn't find one.
Yeah, right? I know. You had to wait for the Swedish-Danish co-production trivia.
You just enjoy saying Swedish-Danish co-production, don't you?
I do.
It rolls, doesn't it?
It does. And so, something that didn't roll was the chemistry between Michael Winner and Walter Mirisch, the producer.
Beautiful.
The two of them apparently did not get along at all, and there was a real battle for control of the project. And Mirisch is coming in. He's a producer on Academy Award-winning In the Heat of the Night, which won Best Picture, the Sidney Poitier film. He's also produced Hawaii, which is a big epic with Julie Andrews, we've mentioned on the show before, as one of the big box office grossers of its year in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
He also produced The Russians Are Coming, which was a Best Picture nominee. So, like, Walter Mirisch is a pretty darn impressive producer. Michael Winner is a guy who kind of dabbles in B movies and kind of, action stuff, westerns. And so, ultimately what happened was Michael Winner resigned, and it was actually David Picker of United Artists who stepped in and basically reduced Mirisch's role and said, look, Michael Winner, you're in the big chair. It's your movie.
He really won that one.
Yeah, he just underlined his name on all the scripts.
just pointed at it. Hmm?
Yes. And another interesting trivia note on this one. This was the first movie to be approved for shooting in the Langley, Virginia headquarters of the CIA. And we've seen it since. The Recruit, I believe, shot a few scenes there.
Yeah.
But this was the first time, and this was very much Michael Winner and Burt Lancaster working together to get inroads on that.
And that bit looks great. It's so weird that this is the first one, this forgotten film. And I'll add in, I tweeted about this, or I X'd, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. A post about this film earlier, and everyone was like, oh, I love these guys. I've never seen this film, never heard of it. So many replies had never heard of this film. And it's so weird that this is the one that first got to shoot in the CIA headquarters.
Well, it's streaming free on Tubi, at least in Canada right now. So it's out there, folks.
What a blessing.
That's right. Now, this is, I think, maybe my favorite trivia note of the entire thing, which is during shooting in Washington, Michael Winner was staying in the Watergate Hotel the night that the individuals from the Republican Party broke into the Democratic headquarters, an event that would ultimately lead to the downfall of Richard Nixon. Michael Winner was in the hotel that night.
Wonder what he was up to.
Conspiracy?
Where was Burt Lancaster?
And he got away with it. A true winner, I suppose.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. That is the great. I mean, in terms of claims to fame, this film has a couple of them. Those two are the top two. It's just weird that it has sort of fallen through the gaps of cinema history.
Yeah. I just wonder if it's like Michael Winner just has this long streak of kind of like B action movies, and this just gets lumped in with the rest of them. He's not a director with like a ton of, I would say, respect. Really, people are, I think, interested in Death Wish and a few of his other films, but he has a little bit of tarnish to him for reasons that are somewhat cancelable, and then also just kind of.
Yeah, I was about to ask, has he been like erased?
Well, he's dead.
I didn't mean his physical body, Cam. Jeez, I wasn't talking about that.
He's definitely viewed as a somewhat problematic figure of his time.
Okay.
And, kind of a little bit disreputable. Yeah.
Sure. Well, okay. Understandable a bit more.
Yeah. So the budget for this movie was $4 million. The box office numbers are somewhat lost to the sands of time. I could find a number, and it was 1.4 million domestic.
Mm-hmm.
It was from a source that I don't necessarily trust, but
Me?
I just don't think this movie was a hit. Yeah, you wrote it yourself. Yeah.
I just wanted to get credit on the episode. Yeah, I don't trust that either. If you don't trust it, but it would also chart with the lack of knowledge of the film.
Yeah, I don't think this was a hit in the 70s. That would be my guess, but what do I know? Top 3 for the year. Number 1 was The Exorcist. Number 2 was The Sting. And number 3 was American Graffiti. That's a pretty solid 3 right there.
The Sting and Scorpio the same year. Conspiracy.
Oh, right. I think they had a bit more of a sting at the box office.
I can't think of any more Scorpion jokes, so please keep talking.
Yes, and the only other note I had was that this movie apparently got an X rating in England, and they had to appeal it and to get it through. It's so weird, though, because I think it has a PG rating in North America.
I'm trying to think of any particular scenes that stand out as X-rated.
Is it the violence? It's weird because it has a PG rating for American ratings, but you watch the movie and you're like, this is not a PG. This is really, I don't think it would fly in these days.
It's not a PG, but if you told me this was a 15, I'd buy that.
Yeah.
There's a bit of blood. There's a couple of gunshots. Yeah, but that's it though, really.
Yeah, I don't really get
it's
that.
Just a lot of people talking and walking and talking and walking and
strolling,
talking, walking.
Well, we can now walk away from the behind the scenes because that sums it up.
And we can talk about the film.
That's right.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Scorpio, does it have a sting in its tail? Let's find out. Cam, I'll bat this one to you first. Winner takes it all. Why don't you take us away?
No, I want you to take it away because you teased it. You had kind of dropped some nuggets along the way. So I want to hear from you first. It's always interesting for me to have someone else open the floor.
Open the floor?
Yeah.
I'm not sure you landed that one, but I'm
not sure if I did either.
No, it's okay. I'm not sure they landed this film.
Okay.
My headline, and I'll read it verbatim. Frustrating. And dare I say, disappointing. It has all the makings to be another 3 Days of the Condor, but the convoluted story and lackluster direction hold back a film full of interesting elements and performances. Scene.
I don't think that was an unpopular take in 1973, judging from the reviews that I stumbled across.
I haven't read anyone else's reviews. I try and make my own mind up. Cam, you're reading everyone else's reviews to inform yourself. How dare you? You plagiarizer. Plagiarizer?
I will say it's. I think it's 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's plenty of positive ones. Yeah,
which is actually better than, I don't know, name a bad Argyle.
Sure, yeah, Argyle, Ghosted, yeah,
and yeah, but that was what I wrote. But to expand on that slightly, I watched this film twice, and both times I watched it, I was going, that was a good moment, or that was a good stunt, or that was a good bit of acting, but I didn't find myself caring about anyone at any point in the film. They set up these characters very quickly at the start and give you no grounding as to what their sort of moral compass is, which is, again, we're talking a 70s, cynical thriller. That can be a thing they do. But I just feel like Winner misses the mark on getting one of the core things a film should do, which is making you care about the protagonists. And it also messes up who the protagonists are, because is it Alain Delon? Is it Burt Lancaster? Who am I supposed to be caring about? Who's the villain here?
Well, that maybe I'll just give my thoughts now because I think you kind of queued me up there. There are things I like about this movie, like that 70s paranoia tone to it. Like, how is that ever something you can't enjoy, right? Like, it's not just like 3 Days of the Condor. I thought of Parallax View a lot watching this as well.
Yeah.
And thinking, boy, those movies did this better.
There's a vibe. There's just a vibe to those films that, like, it just permeates everything. Every single scene in those films has like a stench of pessimism to them.
Yeah.
There's a weariness to outlook to the world, and this film has that too.
And you have like Burt Lancaster at the end giving this very cynical speech about the nature of espionage and, you know, the CIA, and you're like, that is kind of your core lesson. Like, that is ultimately what this movie's about. But did I feel that sort of sensation throughout? Not really. Like, it wants to be incisive, but at the same time, it's very, very muddled. Mm-hmm. This is one of the most messy screenplays I think we've come across in a while.
Sure.
Where maybe it's just editing. I don't know. But, like, following the players throughout gets very confusing. And when you don't have a clear sense of the motivations of at least one of your characters, it gets a little confusing. And I think also there's a real problem, which is that this movie is set up with Burt Lancaster as this agent who's basically on the run.
Yeah.
And you have Alain Delon as the assassin who's going to track him down.
Mm-hmm.
That can build major tension because you've seen that Delon is a very dangerous customer. We see that right at the start of the movie. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, he's younger, he's faster, he's sharper. He is a assassin at the top of his game. He is the Scorpio. He doesn't want to be there the whole movie. That character is constantly like, you know, pulling his shots because he doesn't really want to kill Cross. And they're strong-arming him into this assassination attempt. And he's just like indifferent to the whole thing.
Yeah.
That saps away all tension whatsoever. Because there's so many points where he could have killed the Burt Lancaster character, but he doesn't because he doesn't really want to. And so there's no rising sense of danger towards urgency. Burt Lancaster. There's no urgency whatsoever. There's a couple chase scenes, but yeah, there's a couple goons that get involved that also pursue him that he has to take out along the way. But like, you kind of know they're idiots. Like, they're just kind of disposable goons along the way. So then you're just left with, you know, the Laurier character who just, he doesn't want to pursue him. And so you're kind of building up to this revelation at the end of the movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but like, that should feel like something, but you've watched a character who seems bored to be there for 2 hours.
And then on the flip side of that, because the film might also want you to be on the side of the Cross character played by Burt Lancaster, who, for those who haven't seen the film, who are just listening to the review, Burt Lancaster's character is that old veteran CIA agent I mentioned in the synopsis. He's weary. He's on his last legs. He's about to take it. He's saved up a sizable lump sum of money. He's about to take his wife away somewhere else and just leave the spy game behind. Sounds like a wonderful plan. But throughout, it's implied that he has turned for the other side and he's like selling secrets. And it never really lands on if he has or he hasn't.
Right.
Like you see him doing a transfer at the end of the film, but he's also doing a transfer at the start of the film. Neither thing necessarily means that he's turned, and so you're left with a sort of an ambiguous character that you're meant to be rooting for.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you don't like your assassin who's chasing him down doesn't really want to do it, and Burt Lancaster's character who's trying to get away from the spy game. You don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. The film doesn't decide. The film doesn't pick a side. And so you're left to sort of, it's almost like a passive experience of just watching it without having any emotion. And that's not what you want from a thriller. You want a thrill.
Well, I think there's something interesting about cloaking a character in ambiguity where you don't really know. And that kind of speaks to the murkiness of the spy world.
Sure.
But we are also in the point of view of Burt Lancaster for a lot of the movie where he's on the run. And we then don't have any grounding as to who this character is. We talked on the Patreon fairly recently about the Night Manager, where there's like ambiguity baked into, you know, the Tom Hiddleston character, but it doesn't feel like you're kind of being jerked around. And this movie does that a lot.
Well, the Night Manager, as a point of reference, gives you enough nuggets about his past, and through his actions, you can sort of see what he's like as a person and get a feel for his moral standing.
Yeah.
I don't think you have any idea morally where Burt Lancaster stands, because he very easily shoots people.
Yeah.
He very easily manipulates his protege. One of the final reveals of the film is he's been manipulating him the whole time.
Did you really understand the ramifications of that?
I guess on the second viewing, like, okay, so he set him up to fall in love with this woman that he was using as a carrier. It was like she was meant to like confuse him.
Yeah.
To get him away. Maybe? I don't know.
Because, like, he pays off Jean at the start of the movie to not kill him, right?
Well, let's for people like let's give them a little bit of specification here.
Yeah.
Originally, the Scorpio character, Alain Delon's character, is sent to kill Burt Lancaster. That's we're told that midway through the film. We're not told at the start, but at the start we see the result of that, where Burt Lancaster has actually got to him first and said, "Actually, hey, if I give you some money, would you not kill me?" Which is a pretty good outcome for an assassin.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Paid twice.
So then we have Jean going back home and meeting up with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to know each other fairly well.
Well, she's been missing him.
Yeah.
And she's living with his sister.
Right. And we follow their little love affair, and then at the end it's revealed that she was like a Czech courier that was working with Cross. So I'm like, well, for how long? Because this is then confusing. Like, how long has this con been going on with Jean? I don't know.
No, I don't. I think I can hear people listening and sort of rolling their eyes a little bit that are fans of this film, because they might point out it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Like, this is all small bits of information that doesn't really do much to the story. And I would almost agree with you that it's about betrayal, and it's about trust, and it's about, who do you trust? I suppose is probably the primary theme here. Be careful who you trust. Which is fine. But it's about the delivery. Look at something like Spy Game, for instance. This Spy Game has the exact same message, more or less, as this. And it does it much better.
Heck, The Mechanic. That movie, Michael Winner.
Yeah.
And you have a real sense of just psychologically how these two men operate in The Mechanic. Like,
sure.
These two hitmen who have like this almost bizarre connection to one another. Like, they seem to be sociopaths who are drawn to one another.
It's sort of homoerotic.
Definitely.
There's like a Winton Kid thing going on about them and stuff.
Like, you understand them as a duo, so that when one turns on the other, you're like, oh, this is serious. Here, we don't really know that much about the two of them as a duo. We see them at the top of the movie, but then they're separated, living their own little world, their own little lives. And so the odd encounter, like when he pursues Cross into that park and crosses up in that platform, like you get a moment, but I never felt like there was any real connection that I could care about between the two of them.
Well, and also, like, Burt Lancaster spends the entire film telling Alain Delon's Scorpio, don't trust anyone. Don't trust me. Don't trust anyone. And then the big twist is you find out that Burt Lancaster has been messing Scorpio around the whole time. And Scorpio's reaction is to be mad about it.
Yeah.
Like, I've been telling you, bro, don't trust me. And he goes, oh, no, you betrayed the trust, and then I'm going to go and shoot you. I don't know. Maybe just make it about a film where he just takes the job and hunts him down. Simplify. Just simplify.
It would have more tension that way, that's for sure.
Yeah. You do it this way. This old CIA agent has trained this assassin the ways of the world, and turned him into the best of the world, the Scorpio. Like, that's a code name for the best assassin. He has become the Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Scorpio is hired by the CIA to take him out. And he's like, I've created a monster, and now the monster's trying to kill me. It's like Frankenstein, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's simple and effective.
Yeah, totally.
And it's kind of The Mechanic, which is, I think we keep going back to The Mechanic, which is not a film I particularly loved, but it did have that hook down.
It did, yeah. And it's somewhat similar in that it's quite character-driven, but it has a number of action scenes that kind of take over the movie, as this movie does as well.
Right. I think let's pivot on to things that we did like, because even I said in my review, you did in yours too, there are things about this film that do work.
Oh, definitely. It's just that, yeah, as you said in your review right up front, it's frustrating because there's a lot that doesn't work, and it kind of detracts from the things that you can appreciate.
No, I think with a few minor tweaks and a better director, this would be in the conversation alongside films like The Conversation and Parallax View and 3 Days of the Condor for like 70s spy thrillers.
People might remember it if you mentioned it on Twitter, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's not an indication of, you know, is it remembered by everyone? I'm sure a couple of the replies said, yeah, I love this film, or no, I hate this film. But the majority, 80%, were like, what is this?
Right, yeah.
So, but let's talk about things that we like. And I just want to chalk up, I did sort of tip my hat at the beginning, but I think the three leads, one lead we haven't mentioned yet, but Burt Lancaster and Alain Delon are fantastic, but also Paul Scofield, who plays Burt Lancaster's Russian contact in Vienna, plays Sergei Zarkov, are all fantastic. They all deliver some great performances, and there's moments from their performances that I will remember going forward.
Well, I mean, Lancaster is a great lead. He's 60 years old, but like you have, for example, that kind of gritty action scene at like the lumber yard or whatever it is.
Looks like they're building underground railroad tracks, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about the part where there's like the all the lumber piled up, and he like jumps over it, and then the car hits the lumber right behind him.
Oh yeah,
and you can see Burt Lancaster's face.
Yeah,
it's not doing the old Roger Moore stunt double fakery. It actually feels like, holy smokes! Like I think Burt Lancaster actually did that jump scene, which 60 in the 1970s was a different thing. Nowadays, people seem a little younger when they get to an older age. Not so much the case often in the 70s, but I was watching him like take a fall even during that extended chase sequence, and I'm like, holy smokes! Like Burt Lancaster, those acrobat skills are still with him.
Yeah, I think maybe a choice on his part was to throw himself into it more physically because some of the stuff wasn't there with the script.
Yeah,
maybe. I think like it's interesting with Alain Delon because I've not seen The Samurai. I probably should see it. It probably should be required viewing for watching this film to appreciate it a little bit more. But I feel like, and also, I'll come back to this, but this entire film is dubbed.
Yeah, that's true.
Baffling decision.
Yeah,
baffling decision. But I think when Alan is turning it on, I think he works. Or he's being moody, which I think he suits him quite well. When you first meet him, he's sitting on the bed with a bunch of cats, which is apparently a nod to the samurai that he likes animals. I thought like, oh, he's cool. This guy seems cool. And so that kind of worked for me. And then I mentioned the sort of Russian psychic contact, Paul Scofield, who's a British actor, funnily enough. And there's a scene between Burt Lancaster and Paul Scofield where they're just drinking. And they're two old spies talking about how pointless this game is. And it feels real. It feels like those two people would have had that conversation in that room. They are drunk off their faces, debating whether to open another bottle of whiskey, and they will. And they're going at each other about, my side of spying is better than your side of spying. And then the other guy's like, my side's better than your side. And eventually they realize that both the sides are stupid. This is all stupid. It's one big game. But the way they do it, it's just brilliantly done. It's like a little mini scene within the film that I would recommend people watch. And there are moments like that scattered throughout, which I think comes through just from great performances.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love that scene as well. Give me more scenes like that.
Yeah.
And less of some of the other like plot-based stuff in this movie, and I would be more than happy. Because, yeah, like, I like the way that Zarkov is, this Russian agent, and it's so easy to paint the Russian agent as like the bad guy.
Yeah.
But they just both come from very similar worlds. I thought it was interesting that we get a little bit of insight into Zarkov's backstory, that he was suffering in a labor camp under Stalin. And it's notable to me that like that is mentioned, but you also have the other contact that Burt Lancaster has, who was from the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And it's a case where like both of these contacts he has are very interesting, sympathetic characters who've obviously suffered a lot in their lives, and kind of speaks how they're drawn into this espionage world. But even like the other contact, played by Sheybal Rudensky, that guy, I felt so terrible for him. Like, what a completely charming character who has suffered greatly and talks about how, he used to hear the word Brahms when they were doing lineups in the concentration camp, and he could finally listen to that music without crying. And I'm like, oh, this character exists in a world that I would watch a movie about. Like, he's so compelling and is, very cruelly, killed in this movie.
Yeah.
And, like, that is the weight of the movie. Like, it's so weird because I think this movie wants me to care so much more about the conflict, or lack thereof, between your two leads. And it's these supporting characters where I'm like, just give me the movie about them. It's so much more interesting, whether it is Zarkov or Lang.
It reminded me of another spy film we've tackled on the show where we had a similar issue, and that is Torn Curtain.
Yeah, that's a great example, yeah.
The leads just don't work. There's no energy between them, but the world is brought to life by the supplementary characters around them. You got the professor, you got that lady who wants a visa, chases around for the last 45 minutes of the film. All that sort of stuff. It just adds color to the world, and this chap does too.
Yeah, and you were just talking about Alain Delon in the movie. Like, he is someone who is so perfect. Le Samurai, I think, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this movie, quite honestly, just in terms of them casting him.
Sure.
Because that is, like, such an influential, just very icy cool, noirish hitman film. And they're very much trading on that sort of reputation he would have had, especially with audiences at that particular time. And as I recall, I think we were going to tackle Le Samurai at one point in the past, and then for some reason we pushed it further into the future, and I don't remember why, but we'll get there one day. But it's like, it's so effortless. He shows up, he has that just intelligence and iciness in his eyes that you buy him as a very intelligent killer. And I mean, this movie has problems, but, like, you can't fault the casting.
No, they struck gold there. I just think they weren't exactly firing on all cylinders in other places. But let's talk about something else, because I've mentioned the characters, something you liked.
70s grit. Like, it just, I think, that's when this movie is working for me, is when it has that cynicism, when it brings in the kind of sense of paranoia, when it's actually succeeding at bringing in paranoia. And just like the messiness of the bureaucracy of the intelligence community, and how it's portrayed in, like, a very critical way. And I think that's something that you obviously see in something like 3 Days of the Condor. But you have John Colicos, who shows up as this kind of, like, middle manager within the intelligence agency, who wants to basically do cleanup and kill Cross. But he even has a line where he says, "Oh, I don't want the people upstairs to find out about this." There's something about it where it's establishing very almost like mundane stakes within the intelligence community. Like, these are the lives of our main characters, but it's really just kind of like a low maintenance cleanup job.
Well, it's another Tuesday. Like, it's not really a big old thing. You think of, like, the end of Burn After Reading.
Sure, yeah.
Where it's just like, ugh, okay, all right, well, that's done. Anyway, next job.
And even the way that ultimately Burt Lancaster's character takes out Colicos, where he causes this very cheap distraction, a guy he knows from a gym, another contact, to just throw himself in front of a limo or a sedan or whatever, and fake being hit by the car. Oh, and while that's happening, just show up with a brown paper bag over the gun, shoot John Colicos, and walk away. And it's handled, I think, really well, where it's a memorable moment, but it doesn't feel like a big action moment. It's just like, well, that's kind of a pathetic end to a very underwhelming character. And I mean underwhelming as in intentionally. He's not a big flashy villain.
Well, I think that's probably why that moment works, because it's just so underplayed. He goes in there, causes a cheap distraction, like you said, and just wipes him out with one shot and walks off.
Yeah.
There's no, like, big strings that come sweeping in, or he doesn't, like, fist pump as he walks away. I mean, that would be a very different film.
Well, you don't have John Colicos giving some sort of final damning statement or something, or like a villain speech. Nope.
It's just all taken away from him. He's just dead in a second, which is, I guess, probably far more realistic.
Yeah, and there's, like, just a kind of, like, just a 70s vibe to it, which is like one of those things that's just unmistakable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think of the movie like The Taking of Pelham 123, which is just a wonderful thriller, but it just screams like 1970s, very grounded and gritty. And this movie, when it's working the best in terms of atmosphere, it's really tapping into that. And I even think of that action scene, which I mentioned earlier at that like plant or whatever. It feels like real actors just kind of going through a chase scene, but it doesn't feel pumped up. It feels like it's actually Burt Lancaster taking those hits, rolling down, trying to scamper to get away, you know, pushing a guy off of a railing up top where you just see the dummy land just pathetically on the ground. That's the kind of stuff I like.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you know, but like leading up to that dummy falling down, instead of like Burt Lancaster delivers a roundhouse kick and he goes flying off the side. He's just slowly pushing him.
Yeah.
And the other guy's like, no, don't push me. And he's slowly like, he's almost like, you'd almost have a scene where he goes like, I've got kids, please don't do it. And he falls down and dies. Like, there's something, there's a word I'm looking for that I can't find, but it basically, it doesn't overdo it. It's just very down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it like for that it's more believable, and that kind of pivots into my other like, which is just there's a lot of good moments in this film, memorable moments like that, like the dummy falling off the side, but the reality of a man trying to save his own life, even though he's centimeters away from plunging to his death, and you get given that moment. Like any other film would cut that out. You just see like a punch from Lancaster and then the body falling off the side.
Yeah.
You don't need to see the guy struggling for his life. Referencing Torn Curtain, you don't need to see a body dragged along the floor, put into the oven, and then killed slowly.
Yeah.
But Alfred Hitchcock takes the time to show you the sort of what a life is worth and how quickly or how slowly a life can be taken. And I love bits like that. I mentioned the scene where they're drinking together. The hit and run was the other one as well, like you mentioned, where like the shot on John Colicos and he's out. Like there are moments, and the end. Much as we have questions with the motivations and stuff, it is quite a good little monologue that Burt Lancaster delivers, and the way it all sort of wraps up so pitifully.
Yeah.
Again, kind of like Burn After Reading, where Scorpio goes and kills Burt Lancaster. Betrayal has happened. Scorpio has fulfilled the day, and he walks outside and gets shot.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, told you so.
That felt a little too almost like 70s cliche, though. Like just the massive pessimism.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do we just put that final button in that the world sucks?
It did. I'm not saying that necessarily worked for me, that choice, but it is in keeping with the universe that the film has built.
Definitely. I actually really like the moment, too, where you have one of the goons that's pursuing Cross is shot in the face and is down on the ground, but then is actually still alive for a little bit. Like, it felt like it was a realistic, death versus kind of the more flashy movie death.
I have some questions about your activities outside of recording this podcast, Cam.
Well, so many movies, it would be a pumped up big action moment, but it felt a little bit to me like that fight with the mailman character in 3 Days of the Condor, where it's not just like a clean kill moment. It's like, no, this is messy.
Glamorous was the word I was looking for before. This isn't glamorous.
Right. And I actually also really like the scene where you have the guy, the robber that the CIA hires to break into Cross's house where his wife is killed in the struggle. And they find him basically at like a shelter and they're just like pouring gasoline on him. And it's like that scene is very intense. Like there's moments that have like punch to them, which makes it that much more frustrating. The movie kind of goes, gets swallowed up basically by its own convoluted storytelling.
And look where this robber has ended up. It just goes to show that crime doesn't pay.
Indeed it doesn't. Don't do business with the CIA.
No. I mean, we both live in similar abodes, so to be fair.
That's also true. CSIS is not reaching out to me.
No. Well, not enough people are signing up for our Patreon. So here's a free plug for it, folks.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red Alert Spy Hards, we are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, we are jumping in the convertible and cruising on down to Jackrabbit Slim's to party it up with Quentin Tarantino's 1994 groundbreaking smash, Pulp Fiction. Come do the twist with us, everybody.
So strap on your Condor Man wings and soar into the future with us over at patreon.com/spyhearts.
But before Big O zaps us with a red pulsating laser, let's get back to the Spy Jinx.
Dislike time, Cam. And there's a big one in the room that I want to talk about.
Okay.
The elephant in the corner. And it's painted, if you know what I mean.
Oh, right. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a massive movie-breaking, like this creative decision in terms of, say, like the scripting and the plotting or whatever, but like, I know precisely the moment you are talking about.
When this happened in the film, I lost my mind. I have no idea what they were thinking. Just to give you some indication of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Early in the film, Burt Lancaster has to travel to Vienna via several stops along the way, so he's not traced. And so he goes to a contact, and the contact sets him up with an itinerary and fake passports. You're like, this is fine. And then he turns up at the airport in blackface and an afro.
Yes. It was a very unique choice for the filmmakers and for Cross as a character.
Yeah, I there are times in films where bad decisions are made, but you can understand why they made them because in their mind it's servicing the plot.
Yeah.
For instance, let's take Chian in Remo Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Joel Grey is in yellowface. Not very good. Not a good look, right? Not great. Not great.
No.
And I'm pretty sure when they were casting that film, every single person that fits that description was out of town, right?
That was basically what they said, yes.
Yeah. But that character is crucial to Remo Williams' story.
He's also like the strength of the film. He's the most capable character in the film, yeah.
Yeah, so they needed an actor that could fulfill that role, and I'm sure there were plenty of better ones that could have suited it a lot better, if you know what I mean. But that character was crucial to the film. So I can understand some of the thought process that went into casting Joel Grey and why they maybe ended up there. Not condoning it, and I wouldn't have done that myself, but I understand the plot need for this to happen. What I don't understand is why this happened in this film, because there is no reason why he couldn't just go with a fake beard and sunglasses.
I have no answers to this. This was definitely head-scratching. It took me a moment to even realize what I was staring at. I was like, what a bizarre decision. Michael Winner, maybe not the most sensitive of filmmakers. I've watched those Death Wish sequels, and boy.
It reminded me of some of the choices made in a film, I think it came out 2 years later, The Eiger Sanction.
Yeah.
The beginning half of that film is full of some very odd decisions in terms of scripting, in terms of dialogue, that just don't need to be in the film.
Yeah.
They don't serve any service to the plot whatsoever. They do nothing. And this is the same problem. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I just think it's stupid.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up, yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of a more overarching dislike, I want to talk about the pace.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's this film clocks in at an hour and 50. I think I watched my version, an hour and 45, maybe something like that.
No, it's just under 2 hours.
Felt it. We mentioned some moments and things that we liked. Those moments combined screen time are about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Cam just said this is less than 2 hours. So that's about 100 minutes left. And those 100 minutes are filled with a lot of the same stuff on repeat, a lot of pointless diversions, and a lot of people pontificating for no reason whatsoever.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about having a character like Jean who has no real motivation to pursue Cross, and so that affects pace. Like if there's no mounting tension or anything, or a cat and mouse game that you're having suspense or getting involved in, then it's just characters kind of wandering through a movie. And so much of this movie feels like the Jean character just kind of like staring out a window, being like, I'm not really that interested. And then you cut from that to Cross, just sitting around with colleagues, things like that, wandering around Vienna in some very beautiful locations. They did show the Ferris wheel from The Living Daylights and The Third Man, so that was very exciting. But it's just kind of like characters wandering around kind of a little bit aimlessly in a movie. What I found really weird, though, was like it has this kind of like aimless vibe for so much of it, but then it would have these moments where it was like almost like rushed editing. There was a point where Zarkov is basically saying to Cross, like, you've got to go. Run, Cross. Run. And then it cuts.
And he wakes him up from the bed, right?
Well, it cuts to Zarkov showing up in a boat and waking him up. And I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, that felt like such a sloppy edit.
And then, like, there's a bit with Zarkov where they throw in about him pretending to defect.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
yeah.
like, there's a photo taken at the airport that confuses the CIA briefly. But that happens in the space of like 60 seconds, and you have no idea what's happening.
It almost felt like a fix that they were like, we do not have very much tension going on.
Yeah.
So let's introduce this out of nowhere plot element where the Russians need to be foiled so that they don't get involved, because it's Zarkov like blackmailing his superiors, right?
Yeah. Like I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure after watching it twice I could tell you what really happens in those scenes, but there are moments, there are a couple more just like this that just flash by and you go, oh, wait, what? But I just spent 10 minutes watching him sit in a bedroom and then you're going to do this to me in 30 seconds. Seems like a poor choice.
You would have thought they would have maybe played up the John Colicos character a little more, and I don't mean in terms of making him a more dramatic villain, but just having a better sense as to what he's plotting moment to moment.
Well, you think of the Michael Lonsdale character in The Day of the Jackal.
Yeah.
Who's chasing down the jackal. Well, that is the Colicos character in this. It's not the Scorpio character. And he has none of the ingenuity of Michael Lonsdale's character. He has none of the drive, particularly. He is a pencil pusher who's just doing his job and then is a bit evil. I get the impression he's meant to be a bit evil.
Well, I think he's just corrupted within the intelligence world the way that all spies are by the end.
We're all grizzled and we hate the system, right?
Exactly. And like John Colicos is an actor I've really enjoyed in some things. Like he was the first ever Klingon on Star Trek.
Red Alert.
And reprised that role, on Deep Space Nine. Yeah. So I very much have a fondness for him because of that performance in particular, which he did a few times. And I've seen him in other things where I enjoyed him. But like in this movie, I guarantee you, if you ask me like a year from now who the antagonist of Scorpio was, I won't remember.
Cam, would you join me on a small diversion?
Go for it.
How many Star Trek connections does this film have?
You also have Joanne Linville, who plays Cross's wife, ill-fated wife.
Completely pointless subplot, by the way.
It was. I met her at a Star Trek convention. She was a lovely woman and has passed away since.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a photo with her?
I got an autograph photo.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Any more you'd like to call out?
No, I have a Bond one because Vladek Sheybal shows up.
He does.
As a what was his role again? He was like he wasn't an agent, was he?
He was Kronstein in From Russia with Love.
No, I mean in this movie.
Oh, he was a contact.
Yeah, contact. Yeah. So yeah, he's in a few spy movies we've tackled. I think he was in $1 Billion Brain as well. But yeah, definitely a major Bond figure there.
There's a couple more you've missed out then.
Oh, I know the other one. James Sicking shows up. Now, he pops up as Captain Styles in Star Trek 5 or 3?
3.
3.
He's the captain of the Excelsior.
But more notably, though, to North Americans, he was the father on Doogie Howser. And that's actually a scene I really liked, was the scene where Cross gets the jump on him and makes him ingest the pill that he implies is a suicide pill, CIA style. And we find out later it was just an allergy pill. I thought that was actually a good scene, too.
It was a good scene, although the wrap-up scene after that, where John Colicos refers to him in some rather derogatory language I won't repeat on this podcast, felt very out of nowhere.
Sure. Well, was it out of nowhere, considering some of the movie's other bizarre flights of fancy? I don't know.
That's true. There is one other Star Trek connection, which is Celeste Yarnell, who played a yeoman in a couple of episodes of the original series.
Oh, she was in the episode The Apple. She's actually a pretty major role. I think it's Martha Langdon's the character's name. I met her as well.
That's it.
Very nice woman. Very, very nice woman. And has passed away since as well.
Yep, she has. So yeah, strange. I'm guessing it's just sort of character actors around that time. This is post TOS, but yeah, there's a lot of those names popping up. Just funny seeing so many on their main call sheet.
Well, it's like you can't go wrong for a movie to have these kinds of character actors pop up, because I'm always going to enjoy seeing them.
Yeah, for sure. But I spoke a bit about dislikes. You haven't given us one yet.
Well, I kind of have, and it was just us talking so much off the top about just the murkiness of this storytelling, where it feels like even the characters get lost in it.
Yeah,
and that isn't great. Like, I want to be compelled by the characters that I'm following, and at a certain point, the movie's working against them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so bizarre because, going back to the pace thing, it's like, this is a movie that spends a lot of time trying to be that kind of 70s grittiness, but then it'll have like a 12-minute action scene.
Yeah.
And you're like, this feels at odds with almost like the type of paranoid thriller they're trying to make. I don't know. And it doesn't help things. It means that you're constantly distracting from kind of what the story of the movie is, or what you're supposed to be following.
See, I take the action sequences as just moments of respite between moments of where I'm just bored.
That's true. I mean, I definitely kind of woke up a bit during, the moments where Lancaster's rolling around, pulling off stunts. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But it feels like they kind of clash with this sort of more grounded, gritty movie they want to be making.
Yeah, I would say maybe a little bit, because of just how drawn out they are, like how unreal some of those chases are, that they would just go on a bit too long.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned earlier, this film is very unglamorous with its action, which I do think is in keeping with its sort of nihilist sort of view of the world.
I think the action that feels more set within this world is like the scene where it's the chase up front, where Burt Lancaster's in the car and does the like hard reverse into the car that's pursuing him, and does it like twice, and like the people that are driving, they've got like blood coming down their forehead and everything. Like, that feels messy,
yeah,
in a way that some of the other action doesn't.
That's fair. I think if I'm going to chuck in a dislike, then would be, I mentioned it earlier, but the dubbing.
Yeah, right. Like, this movie's not elegantly constructed.
No, I know that was a filmmaking technique used back then from time to time. So I'm not just like, oh, I don't like dubbing. It's more just, it's not well done dubbing.
Mm-hmm.
There are clearly moments where the entire film is dubbed, or ADR'd, or whatever you want to call it. But there are moments where they haven't spent enough time matching up what is on the ADR to the lips of the characters on the screen. And I didn't even watch this in high definition, and I was able to spot this stuff. Any discerning viewer would see it, and it's one of those things, personally, it may not affect you at home listening or watching the film, but personally, it just pulls me out a little bit.
It didn't bother me too much. It was kind of sloppy, but, I've seen a number of movies from this era that have this, so I'm kind of just used to it. It's not as jarring as, like, I saw Madame Web recently at the time of recording, and, like, that movie has some of the most jarring, laugh-inducing ADR I've seen in some time. In this case, I was like, well, I mean, it kind of fits the movie at times.
Sure, if this had a lower budget and it had sort of lesser names in it,
Sure.
I would have felt like the dubbing made sense. But this feels like in many ways it's trying to be slightly prestigious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not. Or, well, it is, but it didn't turn out to be, if you know what I mean.
Because it's like Michael Winner, I just think of like the movies he's making around this time period, and that they are kind of these, a little bit disreputable B movies in a lot of cases. And this one, though, just from the way it's kind of assembled, it feels like it's trying to kind of walk in the world of like 3 Days of the Condor or some of the other 70s paranoid thrillers, but it just doesn't have the film craft going on that those movies do.
No, it's one of those films to a lesser degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is anything else you want to mention in dislikes? Otherwise, I've got some final notes to wrap us up with.
No, I think so much of it is just tied to our initial conversation about the movie.
Yeah.
Which just hangs over the entire film. And so, yeah, that kind of sums it up.
Well, this is sort of a bigger question that can sort of lead us off. But I mentioned earlier about the ambiguity or the muddiness of the plotting either way. But do you think that Burt Lancaster's Cross character was a double agent? Because the film never spells it out.
I don't think so, no.
See, I got the impression he was.
Oh, interesting.
Because that's where he got the money from.
Okay.
They pointed out like he's got weird bits of money going into his bank accounts and stuff like that, and they never really account for these things. And then he's seen with that Czech messenger girl.
I guess to me why I didn't think so was you have Zarkov talking about recruiting him to the Russians, and he's just like, no, I have no interest in that.
Well, he wants to get away. The whole point is he's sold his stuff and he wants to get out. This is his last hurrah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, though. You look at it a completely different way to me. That's fine.
The movie, I don't think particularly takes a... they're leaving it open to interpretation. I think.
A better filmmaker's... Well, this is it. In a better filmmaker's hands, you go, wow, that's very bold filmmaking right there. Christopher Nolan didn't say the spinner stop at the end of whatever that film I'm thinking of.
What, Inception?
Yeah, that's it. Like, it's bold. It didn't give you the answers. It lets you think about it. David Lynch, Mulholland Drive doesn't give you all the answers. It's bold. But in a lesser filmmaker like Michael Winner, you're just like, I think this is lazy.
Well, I don't know if I think it's lazy so much as like I'm confused as to whether it's an intentional choice to be ambiguous versus a very muddled story carrying you through the movie.
Well, you're saying what I mean, the same thing. I'm saying lazy, you're calling it that. But yeah, I think it's a lack of honing your craft and being able to tell a coherent story. Because I imagine there was a version of the script where it was a bit more apparent. Focused, yeah.
Oh, apparent, yeah.
Explicit.
Sure.
Yeah. Another note I have is I really appreciated the news broadcasts in America at the start of the film.
Yeah, those were kind of crazy.
Kind of crazy. A guy gets assassinated right at the start of the film, and the news network does an action replay of him being shot. I didn't know that's what they did in North America.
Didn't they play it twice?
Yeah.
They played it, and then they were like, let's zoom that one back and play that again for the folks at home.
Let's see this guy die in slow motion.
Yeah, that was pretty weird. And now, this footage may be upsetting to some viewers, or anything like that. They're just like, hey, look at this. Isn't it crazy?
And next up, we have the 3 ducks that have taken over a local village in Utah. It just feels like if Paul Verhoeven had made that scene, I'd understand it.
Well, we've seen so many movies from like the 70s where they have like a real boozy vibe. And maybe it was a very boozy news station.
Maybe it was. Maybe they did not care about whatever the Federal Council of Television is. Is it the FCC over there?
Yeah.
The FCC, yeah. They didn't care about the FCC. They just wanted to get drunk from, martinis made in shredders.
Maybe it was like Anchorman. You had like Ron Burgundy was the one overseeing the news.
Sure. Or, no, this is not a good film, so this is Anchorman 2.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And last note, which is more of a question, we have Scorpio in this film, which, Scorpion is used in the iconography of the poster and stuff like that. And obviously Scorpio is a star sign, has a scorpion in it. So if you were going to pick an animal as your spy code name, what would you go with?
Well, I am a Scorpio, so maybe Scorpio.
I feel like that's cheating.
Okay, I won't go with that. Although apparently I didn't know that I share a star sign with Burt Lancaster, Alain Delon, Michael Winner, and the producer of the film as well. So some things you know live and learn.
There you go.
I mean, it's got to be a shark of some sort, right? Like,
oh sure, yeah.
But I'll pick the shark. I'm gonna go with Mako.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mako's a cool name.
Yeah, that's I mean, there was an actor named Mako, and he was a badass. So there you go.
It's one of those classic scenarios where I've posed a question and don't have a solid answer prepared for myself. So let's work through it, shall we?
Okay.
What would you say my favorite animal is?
The blue-footed booby.
It sounds fun.
It's a bird, yeah.
Oh, I know. It sounds fun. Mealworms?
Mealworms sounds like a perfect agent name for you.
It's fitting, apt, perhaps. Yeah. There you go. Mealworm and Mako. Oh, that sounds like a great comedy.
Comedy? I thought it was a serious spy film we were engineering here.
Oh wait, no, we're doing the 70s political thriller, aren't we? Yeah, we can't make jokes in this episode. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
Cam, any notes but no jokes? Remember?
I enjoyed the 50+ year bellboy that showed up in this movie at the hotel, who's like trying to arrange illicit meetings or something for Cross, and I'm like, what a bizarre character. A character who's like some of the other side figures in this movie, has his own little story that you're like, who is this man?
Maybe he also runs the news network.
And it's funny, maybe, because I think I have to work 48 years to get my pension with the job that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, will I be like that bellboy? Is that going to be me at the end of that long journey?
The day that when you're kneading dough and you hear the break in your hand or something like that, or your wrist goes, you're like, that's probably when you've gone too far.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Some other notes I had, at one point they tail Cross into a Safeway grocery store. Is that the first grocery store since the Ipcris file we've seen?
Oh, what a great question. Is that no, we have one in like the Bourne Supremacy.
Oh, you're right. Okay. This one felt more Ipcris file, though.
Sure, it did. There has to have been another supermarket since the Bourne Supremacy, though.
I don't think so. There was. We had a Costco in Red 2.
I had completely forgotten that film even existed.
Well, that's fair.
That is fair. I had one other note I just picked up on.
Okay.
And this is a tip of the hat to the film for doing something that was quite smart. Very early on in the film, Alain Delon's character, I think he may even have it at the start of the film where it happens very early on, he gets a cut on his face.
Right.
Throughout the film, it heals.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And not like one scene it's there, one scene it's not, one scene it's there. It's actually like progressively healing as the film goes along.
Great. Yeah. Like little details like that always help.
Yeah, it's a cool little thing that they did. They didn't have to do. Didn't have to put the cut there in the first place, because then you've got to have someone doing continuity the entire way through. But I noticed it.
Yeah. A little addition to the movie that also helped: Shane Rimmer, Bond regular, usually pops up in small supporting character roles, is the detective or whatever that arrests Alain Delon for having heroin and then is interrogating him.
We should be keeping score of how many times he appears in films.
It's been a few now, because we saw him in Batman Begins as well on the Patreon, and a couple other things.
Yeah, we haven't done the more films yet, so he'll get a couple more ticks. I should probably go through his filmography and see how many we've done. We'll just keep like a running tab of Shane Rimmer appearances.
I mean, when we start doing things that were done at Pinewood, I mean, the man was always showing up, right?
He must have been in Indiana Jones at some point.
I don't think he was, but we'll investigate that further. There was also one exchange that really made me laugh in this movie. It's when the Joanne Linville, Cross's wife character, Sarah Cross, leaves the party to go back to her house.
Yep.
And the woman's husband comes up to her and says, like, "Oh, where'd she go?" And she says, "She's got the dumps." And he goes, "Jesus, no!" It's the most bizarre setup, because he obviously knows what's going on with the robbery or something. But that entire scene is really bizarre.
I laughed at that because the dumps mean something different here.
It does here too.
Oh. Well, to be fair, he's having a very appropriate reaction then, because no one wants to wish that on anyone.
I just love his Jesus, no!
Think of the smell!
Very unfortunate wording.
Especially for the toilet bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want the audience to laugh at that line, I don't think.
Or at least in my case, like, pay attention for a second.
Yeah.
Like, what did he just say? Rewind. She's got the dumps. Okay, right. But speaking of the dumps...
Yes.
Knockless time.
Yeah.
After an hour and a half of us bashing this film, let's ask the question anyway for kicks. Cam, is Scorpio making the list of the greatest spy movies of all time?
No, it is not. I was fonder of The Mechanic, a movie that also had issues, but like I felt was just a more compelling narrative to get invested in. That, you know, it had its weird decisions as well, but like I cared about it. I was interested in the journey, and that was just not the case with this movie. There was scenes, but there was never a whole that I could embrace.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's one no, of course, so let's see where I come down on this one. Frustrating is the word I used at the beginning, and frustrating is the word I'll use to finish it off. It had potential, it had a lot of good things going for it, and it just couldn't bring it home, so much so that it frustrated us. Frustrated.
Yeah.
2 no's. Scorpio is not making the Knockless. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. I will add a little tag and addendum, a PS. If you like these 70s conspiracy thriller films, and you want something after the Parallax View, and maybe The Day of the Jackal, 3 Days of the Condor, anything like that, maybe stick it on. Maybe. If you want some more of that vibe, because it has that vibe. It just doesn't do it as well as all those films I just mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's true.
But it's not making the list of the best spy movies of all time. Heavens no. But there's merit here to be explored if you're a fan of Burt Lancaster, perhaps, or Alain Delon, or those sorts of 70s thrillers. There are things that you can latch onto and get something out of your 2-hour experience.
I would recommend The Macintosh Man, though, over this one.
That's a great shout. A great early pull from our lineup as well.
And a somewhat mediocre spy film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of the greats, but I would say that it's probably better than this.
It did give us our favorite GIF of all time, though.
It did, indeed. And I haven't seen the Odessa File, but that one seems to have a little more of a positive reputation as well.
And there's a few 70s ones we haven't tackled yet as well that we will get round to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And speaking of getting round to, Cam, what on earth are we talking about next week?
Well, Scott, we've just spent 2 hours with 1970s Hollywood grit. It's time to embrace Hollywood glamour, because we are going to look next week at the 2016 Robert Zemeckis throwback film, Allied, starring Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard.
You're right, Cam. It doesn't get any more glamorous than Brad Pitt, Marion Cotillard, Robert Zemeckis, and, of course, the most glamorous of all, Jared Harris.
Yes, you could not have said it any better.
Absolutely. So your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next time on the show as we head back to war-torn London to take a look at 2016's Allied. If you like what you heard on this episode, please consider supporting us over on our Patreon, patreon.com/spyhard. There's a link in the show notes below. A ton of bonus episodes, over 50 bonus episodes at this point, film commentaries, spy TV show reviews, and just film reviews as well. Lots to enjoy. And plus, you'll be helping keep the lights on here at Spy Hard's HQ. And frankly, the prices keep going up for our hosting service, for the services and software we use to record this. So every little bit helps. Trust us, you will be making a difference. Any donation helps. So thank you for that. And make sure you follow us discreetly, as always, on social media at SpyHards. That's SPYHARDS on Facebook. I don't know, Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And Instagram. But until next time, folks, you'll find Cam and I pitching our spec script of Mealworm and Mako.